Drugstore Blue from Five Oaks Press won an Independent Publisher Book Award, an IPPY. She's also the author of 5 chapbooks, 2 of which won poetry prizes. Her poems appear widely in magazines and anthologies. Recent poems can be found in Calyx, the Cortland Review, 14 Hills, Portland Review, Potomac Review, Rattle, and Rhino, amongst others. She has been published via translation into Polish, Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese. Case is co-editor with Margaret Taft Stever of I Want to Be Loved by You, Poems on Marilyn Monroe, Milk and Cakes Press, 2022. Case is a co-editor of Slappering Hall Press and co-curates with Lynn McGee, series founder, Sandy Yanon, and Carolyn Wright, the W.E. West East Bicoastal Poets of the Pandemic and Beyond series, which features writers from both coasts and many other regions. She recently retired as professor from the New York Institute of Technology in New York City, where she taught for 38 years. Welcome, Susana.
Thank you so much, Lynn, and thank you all for having us. And it's such a pleasure to read with Sally and Margot. We have a lot of interconnections. One of them is Slappering Hall Press, where Margot is the founding editor and I'm a co-editor, and Sally is a member of the advisory board. And another interconnection, which you mentioned, is the Marilyn Monroe anthology, I Want to Be Loved by You, Poems on Marilyn Monroe, in which Margot and I co-edited, and Sally happens to have a poem in it as well. This is, let's see if you can see it, that's de Kooning's Marilyn on the cover, and of course the more representational Marilyn on the back cover. So I'm going to start with a Marilyn Monroe poem. Josephine mentioned that she had heard some. I think that perhaps I hope she has not heard this one. This is the one that's in the anthology, and this is called Atomic Blonde, and it makes a number of references to the film Niagara, if you've seen it. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend seeing it. Atomic Blonde. A woman labeled a tramp in a tight dress in the first half of any 1953 movie is going to be dead by its second half, like in Niagara. Marilyn playing vampy Rose Loomis, passion kissing her lover behind a barrier to the falls, the water a symbol of rutting life force if ever there were one, is later strangled by her husband George in revenge. I had that husband too, who'd already tried to cut off my air at home, a pillow over my face. This wasn't a film, and I fought back. Why were we at Niagara on vacation? I'd left the lover in New York City to kiss and mess around with on my return. No intent to coax him into a killing by a waterfall. I wanted only to be pushed out, too indecisive by nature just to leave. But in this marriage, I always had to do the cleaning up. Not a femme fatale, I was more the Polly Cutler type. The one who takes a first aid kit on vacation to smooth all possible injuries. But my George Loomis didn't steal a boat and drop to his end over the falls. When we got home, I got the papers and he signed them. So the rest of my time, I'm going to read from my most recent poetry book, The Damage Done, from Broadstone Books. This is, in a sense, one long poem, so I'll be reading parts. It's split up into a number of parts, which all have their individual titles, but it's one long narrative about the malfeasance of the FBI in the COINTELPRO years, specifically in the case of the events that take place in this book, the late 60s and the early 70s. a time in which the FBI targeted various progressive groups, anti-war groups, civil rights groups, feminist groups, indigenous rights groups, tried to destroy the groups and harassed and tried to destroy people who supported the groups, were active in the groups, or helped fund the groups. So there's recurrent characters in this book, and the main one is a woman named Janie, who contributes to progressive causes and is the target and is found dead at the beginning of the book. And much of her story is told in flashback. So this is Woman Recumbent in Car. A car sits in violation of parking rules, the only car on the street. In it, blonde hair peeks out from a blanket on the seat. It's early in the morning, a tow truck operator new on the job. He's back from vacation, wonders if he should have remained on the beach, the blanket reminding him of scratchy sand, pina coladas, his newly minted wife. Every day, people come back from vacation to tragedies. Picture him sitting in his truck waiting for the police as he plays cuts from Blonde on Blonde. Every day, people listen to these songs. He's a Dylan, classic rock appassionato, wonders if the dead woman is a debutante like Edie Sedgwick in Just Like a Woman. He wonders if his new wife is full of feminine tricks. This is one of the flashbacks in which her life unfolds. Flashback bedroom. Blame the walls and doors. They entice the husband to punch them. 5 stitches on his right wrist just last summer. Inanimate objects only. He says he is a man of peace. His familiar rage, it doesn't cease with 3 days in a row of humid heat, 90 degrees. And how come Janie wasn't in her room in Taos after the shoot? Like an asymptote, she's gotten so close to perfection, can taste how close, like she tastes the black coffee, water, sugarless gum, all she's had for days, so tired of being shown off like an expensive watch. Her precision surgery on her food. He critiques her microscopic cutting. And how did her ass blow up overnight? The mirror is relentless. The water, she drinks too much of it, needs to do more calisthenics. The weight on the scales unchanging. The food she pretends to eat. Sometimes she has to put a small bit in her mouth, exercise the gain away or purge, but anything is better than throwing up again. The rules for when he can look at her, only when dressed or when the lights are out, darkness and cover. Her ribs, where downy pale white fur has begun to grow, though she is freezing all the time. The room of ecru walls, the color picked from over 30 variations of beige. For weeks, samples were shuffled and placed on their bed while she tried to decide. His only comment that nothing was getting laid on their bed lately except the paint swatches. Blame the husband. He likes them thin and young. It's very hard to write a series set in the late 60s and early 70s without addressing the Vietnam War. And in this poem does that. In this part of the book, the detective, who is one of the main characters, is going to visit his brother who has been injured at Khe Sanh, one of the big battles of Vietnam. A free fire zone means anything that moves can be shot. Talking again about how green everything was, the fire and smoke, the mountains and silence, the jungle, which he never gets past when he tries to tell the story of how anything that moves is shot, and he was shot, and here he is now in their parents' home instead of a rat's ass chronic care veterans facility, has been like this for years, body broken, shrapnel still in his head, trying to talk to his older brother, the detective, who's wondering if the kid wants to die because someone now will have to do it for him. And all he had needed to do was stall a little bit. The war was winding down, or be some other place on some other hill, not that hill where nothing will ever grow back, a monument to ill conception, instead of here now, crying again, some spittle on his lips. And I will close with a poem which addresses an incident that happened in New York City on West 11th Street, where a townhouse blew up back in that time during the making of bombs. And the rest is explained in the poem. And this is called COINTELPRO Portrait with Blasts. Another young woman, former teacher, hates being rich. The revolution is here. She puts her dividends from the family corporation into the collective's common fund. The Black Panthers laugh at them, summertime soldiers. Townhouse basement on West 11th Street, house where the poet James Merrill was a toddler, house of the parents on vacation in St. Kitts of one of the other bombers. The bomb goes off too soon, meant for that evening. An Army base dance for non-commissioned officers and their dates at Fort Dix. They find pieces of bodies shot through with roofing nails, the nails shrapnel to increase the radius of destruction. Air of ash, wood, glass, hail of grit and cracked plaster. In the basement, 4 12-inch lead pipes packed with dynamite from the New England Explosives Corporation, blasting caps and cheap alarm clocks, 2 50-pound cases of dynamite, enough to destroy every townhouse on the block. A detached fingertip matches that of the former teacher on file from the days of rage. 2 male would-be bombers dead too, 1 crushed. All this will fail to end the war. About the obliteration, it was nothing egocentric, her father tells the press. James Merrill, by the way, also later wrote a poem about, after the bombing, wrote a poem about West 11th Street and his former house. So thank you very much.